Okay, so let's get right into it. There was one headline this week that just completely took over the conversation, you know? It sent some pretty big shockwaves through foreign policy circles. And it's a biggie, suggesting a huge shift in how the world sees its most powerful nations. And here they are, the numbers that started it all. This is from the 2025 Gallup World Poll. They talked to people in over 130 countries. What they found was that global approval for China's leadership shot up to 36%. In the United States, well, it's lagging behind at 31%. That 5-point gap, that is one of the biggest we have seen in almost 20 years of this poll. So you have to ask, right? Is this it? Is this the moment the world order officially pivots? Is this that big inflection point we've all been talking about for years? I mean, the data looks pretty dramatic, but is that what's really going on here? Well, as you probably know, the headline is almost never the whole story. So let's start peeling back the layers on this poll and figure out what is actually driving this pretty historic-looking shift. Okay, so here's what's so fascinating. When you really start to break down these numbers, this isn't really a story about some massive global wave of love for China. The real story here is about a pretty stark collapse in how the world sees American leadership. And this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? It shows you exactly what happened. It wasn't that China's approval just skyrocketed out of nowhere. I mean, sure, it rose by 4 percentage points, and that's a decent gain. But look at the US. Its approval fell by 8 percentage points. The US decline was literally double the size of China's gain. So this gap, it was created way more by the US dropping than by China rising. And to put that 8-point drop into perspective, that is a massive shift in just 1 year. But get this, the poll also found a record-high 48% global disapproval rate for the US. Think about that. And in 44 countries, most of them NATO allies, US approval dropped by 10 points or even more. This is a classic story of soft power just eroding. You know, if we zoom out and look at the trend over time, we can see this isn't actually the first time something like this has happened. US approval ratings are incredibly sensitive to who is sitting in the White House. Just look at the pattern here. China pulls ahead at the end of the Bush administration. Then the U.S. soars to a peak of 49% in Obama's first year. Then China leads again during Trump's first term. And here we are again. Researchers have a name for this. They call it the leader effect. And it's a really crucial vulnerability in America's image around the world. So we know the story is really more about a U.S. collapse, and it's heavily driven by the political cycle. But you know what? There's another big reason to be a little skeptical of that single global number. The truth is, there's no such thing as a single unified global opinion. It just doesn't exist. The world is really fragmenting into these different regional blocks, and each one has its own reasons for picking a side. You've got sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, showing a really strong preference for China, and that's driven by all the tangible infrastructure investment they see. Western Europe still leans towards the US, but that loyalty is definitely weakening. And Southeast Asia, that's the perfect example of a region hedging its bets, looking to China for economic partnership and to the US for security. Let's just double-click on Africa for a second. China's advantage there comes from something political scientists call performance legitimacy. It's a simple idea, really. Approval is earned by delivering real, tangible results, building roads, ports, and power grids that people can actually see and use every single day. It's a super direct and really effective way to build goodwill. And frankly, it's an area where China has a big structural advantage. Okay, so if opinions are this divided and this cyclical, what do polls like this actually tell us about who's really in charge of the world? To understand that, we have to get back to a really fundamental idea in international relations, the difference between soft power and hard power. So, soft power. That's your ability to attract and persuade other countries, rather than forcing them to do what you want. It's the power that comes from your culture, your political values, and having a foreign policy that others see as legitimate. These Gallup polls, they are basically a giant barometer for soft power. Hard power, on the other hand, is the opposite. It's the ability to coerce. This is your military strength, your control over the world's financial plumbing, like the dollar system, and your dominance in setting tech standards. And on these metrics, the U.S. still holds a massive structural advantage. So this brings us to what might be the most crucial point of all. Think of it like this. Public opinion tells us which way the wind is blowing. Hard power determines who controls the weather. See, public sentiment can shift really quickly, just like the wind. But those deep, structural forces that actually shape the international order, the weather, That is much, much harder to change. All right, so if you're a global business reader or just anyone trying to make sense of this, what do you do with this information? I mean, how do you navigate a world where the winds of opinion are shifting so fast, even if the overall weather patterns of power haven't fully changed yet? Well, the key strategy that you're hearing in boardrooms everywhere isn't decoupling. That's way too simple. The smarter play is de-risking. And this doesn't mean you just up and abandon a huge market like China. No, it means you systematically and strategically reduce your vulnerability to political shocks and to having all your eggs in one basket. And this isn't just a theory, right? Here's what de-risking actually looks like in the real world. You see companies building parallel supply chains. That's the China plus N strategy, where they're adding capacity in places like Vietnam, India, or Mexico. They're creating dual operating systems, one that's compliant with the US-led bloc and another for China's partners. And maybe most importantly, geopolitical analysis is no longer some side project. It's becoming a core part of every single major business decision. So let's bring it all home. This shocking Gallup poll, it's a powerful signal. It's telling us that the winds of global opinion are shifting, and they're shifting fast. But, and this is a big but, it is not a final verdict on who is in charge. The deep structures of hard power, the international order itself, have not yet followed that shift. And that gap, the one between opinion and reality, that's where all the risk and all the opportunity is right now. Which leaves us with the final critical question to think about. If global opinion is the wind, and we can now see pretty clearly which way it's blowing, what kind of weather, the real structural storms of hard power, should we all be watching for on the horizon?